Hello everyone, this is Joshua Haji, Software Engineering Supervisor here at Pixelate, and I'm here to talk to you about Quasar. Now in this video, we're going to talk about the Quasar components, how to use them, as well as how we can use them, and the features and capabilities of each of these components. Now, this video is not going to be a very long video, but rather a series of videos which will cover different components for each video. So please stay tuned to our channel and wait for the latest updates. Don't forget to click the subscribe button to get notified whenever these tutorial videos are already uploaded. If you think this video is helpful and useful for you, please don't forget to leave a like, as well as for those of you who have questions, please don't hesitate to leave a comment down below. So before we begin, first you need to have your own Quasar app. So in this example, we have a Quasar app already prepared. So if you don't know how to build your own Quasar app, you can refer to the video in our Quasar tutorial video. You can check out the link to the video in the description below in order to learn how to build your own Quasar app. So next that we have now our own Quasar app, we can start implementing the buttons. So in this video, we're going to talk about the buttons in general. So we have buttons, we have button groups, as well as the button drop down here. So first off, let's talk about the buttons. So here you can see that we have our own Quasar app ready to go. So looking at the documentation, it says here that Quasar has a component called QButton, which is the button itself, which is useful as well as packed with useful features. So here you can see that you have the QButton API as well as some typical usage. So in this case, we can try implementing the standard button. So in order to do that, we can click view source in order to see the source code. So as you can see, you have several implementations right here. So what we can do is implement the primary one, just to give a quick rundown of how to use buttons. So with our component here, which is the index.view, we can remove this element and then create a QButton. Now, when you do that, what you're going to see in your app is a button with literally nothing. So in order to add content to this button, we can add a label. So we can use label and then let's say a button. So once you do that, the button is going to have its own content. So as you can see, it has now a label. Aside from label, which is described here, you can also assign colors to it. So we can use the, let's say, color attribute, and then let's add a, let's say, primary color. So what it's going to do is it's going to use its primary attribute as the color, which is in this case is blue. So it's going to have a blue color. So aside from color, you can also assign specific colors to the text, which is this one. So we can try using that by adding a text color, let's say red. So if we do that, you're going to see that the text color is now red. So since it looks a bit weird, let's go and turn it back to white, which is by default. Next, aside from that, you can assign different classes, or rather properties, to the component as well. So in this case, you have a glossy finish, which is like this, which is supposed to look like this. So implementing that, you can add a glossy property, and then you'll see the button looks a bit glossy, which is right here. You can notice that the shade here is a bit brighter and the shade below is a bit darker, which gives it a glossy finish. So aside from this, you can also add your custom colors. For example, here you can attach styles to it. You can add some components, for example, rather properties. For example, this one, which is flat. So we can try this flat. So let's put a flat property here. So as you can see, it looks a bit weird, but if we remove the glossy, you see nothing because the text color is white. So if we turn this to black, you can see that the button is right here. Now, since we declared it as flat, it literally contains nothing but the label itself, as you can see here. So aside from that, you can also have icons in your buttons. For example, we have this button here which contains an icon on left. So in order to implement that, what we need to do is we need to attach an icon to it, which is an icon property. So let's remove the flat to revert it back, as well as the text color to revert it back to the default, and then add an icon property here, and then add a, let's say, send. So as you can see, you can add icons to your buttons. Aside from the send, you can also assign different icons to it based on the name only. So you have mail here. So for the reference of the icons, you can use the icon here. So here's the API, as well as here's this is where you grab your icons. So in our case, we use material icons. So if we add a, let's say, this one, which is mail, so the icon name is mail, it will appear as a mail icon as well, which is based off the material icons right here. So going back, so you can see here we have our button. So going back here, you can see that we have left. So also, aside from that, you can assign the icon to different directions. For example, in this case, you have it on the left, while on this one you have it on the right. Or rather, in this one you have it both left and right. So we can try implementing those. So in order to implement that icon on the right, we need to append a icon right attribute. So let's try an icon right attribute, and then let's use the send icon, and then let's remove the icon. So if we do that, you will see that the icon to the left has disappeared, and then the icon on the right side has appeared. So aside from that, you can also use both icons for the left and the right. So in order to do that, you can add an icon property here, and then add the icon name, for in this case, mail. So as you can see, you have icons both on the left and the right. So it depends on your usage, but there are some use cases where you need to add icons for both left and right part of the button rather. So aside from that, you can also use stacked icons. So the icon is on top rather than the bottom. So in order to implement that, you need to add a stack property, which is this one. So as you can see, the left icon, which is this one, was formerly around here, and now it's on the top. And then the right icon, which is supposedly here, goes to the bottom. So if we remove this icon right, what's left is the icon on the top, which is a button. Rather, the mail icon right here. So aside from those, you can also have rounded buttons, which looks like this. So in our case, in order to transform our button into something else, what we can do is, let's wrap this in a container, which is an inline block, to make it look much better. So we wrapped it inside a div, and then we add another div, which is like this. So let's add a Q button, which is rounded, and then with an icon of mail. And then let's add a color to it. Let's say green. So if we do that, you can see that we have a button here. So rather, instead of rounded, just use the round. Make it circle like so. We can add some, let's add some padding in between. So there you go, there's space in between. Now, you might be asking, what does this class mean? It is Quasar's padding and margin utilities, wherein Q signifies the Quasar class, P corresponds to padding, Y corresponds to the direction, and then these two characters correspond to the size. So it can be SM, it can be XS, it can be LG, or it can be XL. So there are different combinations for that one. So in this case, we use MD. For more information about those classes, you can visit the style and identity right here, and then you can use the spacing classes right here, which as you can see, it has multiple sets of combinations based on the letters itself. So for more information, you can simply read this right here. So going back to the button, aside from the rounded buttons, you can also have custom elements inside your button. So in this case, you have a image right here. So we can try implementing that. So instead of having this one, let's add another division, and then let's create a Q button, and then let's make it round as well. Q avatar, which is this one, and then let's add a size element to it. So let's say 50 pixels. 50 pixels should suffice. And then we're going to add an image right here. So image src, and then assets, and then let's grab this file. So Quasar logo vertical.svg. So there you go. Now if you have any questions regarding what I'm doing around here, guys, don't hesitate to comment down below. If you have clarifications or you have suggestions as to what you want to see next, don't be shy, just keep commenting down below. We really appreciate the feedback. So going back, what we did here is we created a round Q button, which is this one, the rounded shaped Q button, which is similar to our button above, and then we used an avatar component, which is this one. So you might be wondering, what is an avatar? The avatar is a component of Quasar which looks like this. So it is an image wrapped with specific CSS styles in order to look like an avatar, hence the name. So going back, since we have an avatar component here, we need to add an image. So what we did is we simply added an image, and then we put the source file of the image, which is this one, as you can see right here. This sign here denotes that we're talking about the assets folder right here. So that's a quick rundown of some of the syntax of Quasar. So again, going back, aside from that, you can also truncate very long content right here, which looks something like this. So we create an ellipsis div, which is a helper class of Quasar useful for cutting very long content into noticeable ones. So as you can see, it outputs something like this. Because of this class, since the content is kind of long and it won't fit the specific size of the button, what this class does is cut the content up to here, because this is the content that fits inside the button. So aside from that, you have several designs right here. As you can see, we have flat. So let's give it a try. Let's see, we can use that in our simple button right here. So let's add another button instead. So let's add a QPyMD class to create some padding in between those elements, and then let's add a QButton class, or rather a QButton component here. Next, in order to demonstrate, let's add a label to keep things simple. So we have a button. So now that we have a button, which is this one, let's try using the flat. So let's append a flat property. So a flat button basically looks something like this. So yes, something like that. So let's add a color. Let's say what color would be useful? Secondary. Let's use that one. So there you have it. It's going to look like this, which is a button, but rather it looks flat, hence the name. So aside from that, you also have a flat rounded. So what's the difference between the two? As you can see, when you hover above the buttons, you see a rounded corner as the shadow, but on the other hand, the flat one contains a flat corner. So that's what the flat rounded means. So if you add a rounded attribute here, or rather property, the button contains now a rounded shadow. So aside from that, you can also have flat buttons which uses icons. So in this case, we can use the icon, which is, let's say, the male. So let's keep the color, let's keep this one, and then let's add an icon instead. And let's use the male icon, as well as remove the label. So what it's going to look like is something like this. So in order to make it circle, we remove the ed. Let's just keep it round, and then you'll see the button is a circle rather than the rounded button, which fits for, let's say, textual content. But for icons like this, what we're going to use mostly is the round class. So again, if you're getting overwhelmed, please don't hesitate to leave a comment and we'll guide you as to what you can do and what you can use. So please don't be shy, just leave a comment. So going back, you have an outline here. So with outline, what it does is it creates an outline of your button rather than adding solid elements to it. So if we use that, what you get is something like this. So we replace the icon with the label before, and then you get this specific output, which is like this, like so. So you've had outline, yes. So we remove the flat, and there you have it. You have an outline button. So aside from the outline, you can also have it as a rounded button, giving it smoother edges as well as making it a bit oblong and round. So if you can also, aside from that, you can mix and match several designs, so making it something like this again. So in order to do that, let's revert it back to icon, and then let's have a mail icon, and then let's keep it round. So if you do that, you get this button right here. So aside from those, you can also have the push property, which gives it a 3D feel. What do you mean by 3D? Well, it looks basically something like this. So reverting back the button state, it looks something like this. So when you click on the button, you can see that it's pushing down a bit. So that's what I was mentioning about when I meant the 3D feel, because it feels natural that when you click a button, it pushes downwards. As you can see, every time I click on the button, you can see that there's a white ripple appearing on the button itself. That is also a CSS effect of the Quasar itself. So as you can notice, all the buttons so far have are all in caps. So in case you wanted to have no caps in your button, you can simply add a no caps property, which is like that. And then what it's going to return to you is the text in the label as is, without any capitalization, like in the previous buttons right here. So you have the button right here. So aside from those, you can also have a glossy. As you can clearly see here, you have the glossy. So in order to do that, simply add a glossy. And then let's keep it so. So as you can see, it now has a glossy finish. So moving on, we have alignment. So have you guys been going well so far? If you have questions, please don't hesitate to comment, as well as for those of you who see this video as useful so far, please don't forget to leave a like. So going back, you have button alignment here as well. So you can align the content based on its arrangement. So as you can see, you have align left, meaning that the content is aligned to the left, which is you can see right here. And then you have an align right, which aligns the content to the right side of the button. So there's also an align between. So what you mean by between is it gives spaces in between content. As you can see, there's a bit of space in between. And then align around, which gives it an even, it gives even distances between elements. As you can see here, there's a bit of space to the left and there's a bit of space to the right, as well as this content right here. So it has a bit of space on the left and the right as well. So aside from that, you also have the size. You can have different sizes for the buttons. So how do you use that? You basically attach a size, which is this property right here. So in our case, we can make this button, this button a bit bigger. So let's add a size in the form of XS. XS means extra small. So as you can see, it's very, very small right here. Now, if we use LG, it's going to create a large button. So the biggest size it can accommodate in terms of sizes is XL. So you have this very big button. But that's not all. You can also use sizes, which means, or rather, sizes that looks like pixels. So we can assign pixels as sizes. So let's say we can add a 300 pixel button. So you have this button right here. So let's make it a bit overkill and let's use 1000 pixels. So as you can see, it's a very large button. Way too much. Let's tone it down back to, let's say, 500 pixels. It's still a big button. Let's make it 150 rather. It's way too big. So there you go. So aside from the classes, which is the XS, SM, MD, LG, and XL, you can also have pixels as the size. So as you can see, it has a pixel size right here, and then it has a class size right here, which is differentiated by the letters. So aside from that, you can also have padding. So how do you use padding? So basically, you add this property here. So let's add a padding. So let's add a medium padding. So as you can see, the button contains a bit of padding. So let's try to adjust it to small. And as you can see, it has a very small padding right here. So we tried the other way around, the biggest padding available. And as you can see, the padding adjusts as well. So there are use cases wherein you need to adjust the padding of the buttons inside in order to make it a bit easier for the user to, rather for the developers to create unique experiences. So aside from those static contents, buttons can also have deterministic, or rather can have progress related properties. So in case you want to have a button that creates a loading sequence, you can also have that. So how do you do that? What you need is a loading prop. So what do you mean by loading prop? Loading prop is basically a property that tells the button whether the button should create a loading state or not. So to demonstrate, let's use this. Let's create a property right here, or rather a object. An object key. So let's name it as isLoading, and then let's set it to false to indicate that the button is not yet loading. So if we do that, you can see here the button does nothing. But if you set it to true, you will see that it has a loading state. So this feature is useful for those instances where you need to, like, let's say, call on a backend database or make contact with a server and wait for a response, or if you want in general to process things which gives the user an idea that something is going on, hence the loading state. So let's turn it back to, let's keep it that way. So aside from those, you can also customize the ripples effect. So as you can see here, previously when you click on the button, which is this one, let's see, if you click here, you can see that there are several ripples happening, right? So what the custom ripple does is it allows you to define if there are ripples happening whenever you click. So in this case, if you click the no ripple, there's nothing happening. If you click the yellow ripple, you will see that it uses the color yellow as an effect. So for this one also, it, rather than propagating from where the point of click happens, as is the default behavior of the button, as you can see here, it starts from the center regardless of where I click. So that's what happens if you have a centered ripple. So aside from that, you can also have links here. So for example, if in case you have a button that will redirect you somewhere using Vue's router link, you can have that as well by using this property here. So you can use a button to dictate what route it will take. So if you click the link, it will then head you to that route. So to demonstrate, if you click this, it will redirect us to this page. So you can use the button for controlling Vue routers routing behavior using the router link right here. So for other options, you can have full width buttons, which takes up the entire content of the div, or rather the div, and buttons with tooltips, as you can see. So if you hover on the button, it displays a tooltip like so. Aside from those, you can have disabled buttons as well. So in order to implement a disabled button, you simply add a disabled property right here. So like that. So let's use this property instead. And then remove the loading state. So as you can see, the button is disabled. So in those cases where you need to disable the button, you can use the disabled property right here. And then you need to add an object, or rather a data object, which contains a true, which indicates the disabled set, or false, which removes the disabled property. So aside from that, you also have button groups here, which is, as you can see, is a set of buttons. So how do you implement something like that? So in this case, first we create a div. So again, to take a short break, if you have any questions, please don't forget to leave a comment below, and then we'll cater and answer your questions. For those of you who have suggestions or anything else you want to say, please leave a comment below. We greatly appreciate the feedback. So going back, we have the div here, which we will create and then add some spacing in between. And then in order to implement this, if you view the code, you can see that there's something new here. So we have this QBtnGroup. So what does this element do? It basically tells Quasar that there is a group of buttons inside it. So if you add a QButton and then push and then add a label to it, let's say home, you will see that there's a button here like so. And then we can add another button and then use a different label, let's say profile. So now we have two buttons packed together. And then if we add another one, which is the same, and then we add a different label, let's say messages, you will have three buttons now. Now you might be wondering, why does these buttons have the same properties like so? Because as you can see here, it says here that, or rather, if you don't, here, so it says here on the warning that you must use the same design props on both the parent and the children in order for that to work. Hence, we have this push right here, indicating that all our buttons inside the button group will have a push property as well as individual push properties in order to keep it straight like so. So it all looks the same. So as you can see, they all look the same. You can also have a rounded. So in order to do that, we simply replace the push with a rounded like so. And then you'll see that the look also feels different, which is the expected output of the rounded button right here. So that's it for button groups. So next, we go to button dropdown. So are you having fun so far, guys? Are there any difficulties implementing the said features? Please don't forget to leave a comment below, and then we'll answer your questions and help you get through your difficulties. Going back, what is dropdown button? Dropdown button is basically a button that displays a dropdown like so. So again, how do you implement such thing? As you can see, if you click the view source, this is what it looks like. So implementing that button, we can create another div here and then let's add some spacing in between to keep things clean. Next is what we're going to do is we're going to create a QBtnDropdown, which is right here. So let's add a QBtnDropdown, and then let's add a label. Let's say Dropdown, as well as add some color to it. So you have a color, let's say primary. Next, instead of closing the element immediately like so, we add a element inside it. In this case, let's create a QList. Now QList is Quasar's component for creating a set of lists. Next, what we're going to add is QList or QItem. Yes. So we have a QItem which is clickable, and then we're going to add a QItem label to it. What it means is that, so let's say like that. So now you have one element right here. Q. As well as let's add a QItem section. And then we're going to migrate the label inside of it. If we do it like so, it looks like this. So what we did here is we created a QBtnDropdown, which is this element, and then we attach a list inside it. And then inside that list, we created an item, which is a clickable item, which makes it look like this, making it clickable, as well as add a section inside the item with a specific label of home. Now, if we duplicate this, we get another item. Let's say profile. So now, instead of one, you now have two items. Duplicating it further and then renaming it to messages, you now have 3. So now you might notice that as I click these buttons, nothing happens, or rather the drop-down is still open, which is what we don't usually want to happen. So in order to disable that feature, what we need to do is we need to add this property, which is the vClose pop-up. Now what it does is it tells Quasar that once you click this specific element, the pop-up closes by itself, like so. Now once you click the item here, the drop-down closes. So that's what this vClose pop-up means. Aside from that, you can also have various content, which looks like this one. So as you can see, the drop-down displays its own div. Like in this example, you can see that there is a div here, and then you have multiple content inside the div. So you have the column here, which is this section. You have the settings here. You have a toggle functionality here with a specific label, which is this one. You have a Bluetooth toggle here, which has this label, and then this line here is this separator. Next is there is another column right here, which is this one. What it does is it creates an avatar, which is this one, with a specific size of 72 pixels, and then an image element pointing to a URL somewhere. So aside from that, you have this text right here, which is this one, the text subtitle 1 class named John Doe. And then aside from that, you have a button here, which is the logout, which points to this one, which is the Q button itself. So as you can see, you have a myriad of options when creating the drop-down button. So as you can see, it has pretty unique content right here. So aside from that, you can split your drop-down as well into something like this, wherein the drop-down itself is split. So you have your QList here, and then your QItem here, and then another QItem here, which contains an avatar, which is this avatar, another section for the text, which is the two of this one, and then another section for the icon, which is this one, the yellow one. So what split does is, if you go back upwards, if you search for the split right here, it says here that it splits the drop-down icon into its own button. Hence, the split. So as you can see, it splits up here. So we have one and then we have another. So aside from those, you have a custom button here as well. You can have custom icons, which is this one. You can have different content, and then you have a view model. So you can see that Quasar can detect if your drop-down is open or not by using the view model. So what it does is, you have a Q toggle here with the same view model, as well as a Q button drop-down with the same view model. So looking at this, if you open the drop-down, it triggers the drop-down as well as the menu state here. So if I click this, the drop-down closes. So you can use view model to open drop-downs. Aside from those, you can also disable the drop-down, which is like so. So as you can see, you can disable both, which is the main button and the drop-down. You can disable the main button only, which is like this, which allows the opening of the drop-down. Or you can disable only the drop-down, which is this one. But the button here is still clickable. So for those of you who have still further questions, please don't forget to comment down below. With that said, that's it for now for our buttons API. For more tutorial videos, please don't forget to click the subscribe button and wait for further updates. So in the future, we'll be uploading more videos talking about more components. As you can see, we still have a lot of components to cover here. So please do stay tuned for that. Again, this is Joshua Hadji, Software Engineering Supervisor here at Pixelate. See you later, Pixelators.